Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Technical. Back here again, Keaton and I.
Hey.
He's that way, this way, that way. And we're here with episode number 20, kind of a milestone for us. This means that season 3 is just as long as season 1 and 2 combined. So that's nice.
Oh, well.
I can count, so at least as far as I know. My esports colleagues would say I can't count. We're going to talk a little bit about obesity. Some type of paper got released recently,
Yes.
a study.
Yes.
And I'm always looking for more excuses on why I'm fat instead of me just being lazy.
We could talk about the excuse thing in a bit. But yeah, this paper is super cool. It was essentially not necessarily pointing towards a direct cause of obesity because it's a very complex thing. There's lots of causes of obesity, but pointing towards an overarching cause of the increase in obesity in the U.S. over the last 30 or 40 years. And essentially what this paper did is from John Speakman's lab, who's like a fantastic metabolic researcher. He puts out great stuff. And I work on metabolism, but I'm more at the like molecular level. So the whole human metabolism I don't know super well. So I won't be able to explain it perfectly, but I generally get the idea of this paper. So what they did, so obesity is essentially caused by like intake of it's determined by intake of energy, intake of calories versus how much energy are you burning or how many calories are you burning throughout the day. And you can burn calories either by actively moving, walking, your active action, that's exercise, can be thrown in there. And then you're also burning calories basally. Like if we're just sitting here, we're burning calories. Your heart's beating, your brain's functioning, your organs are functioning, your body is thermoregulating. So it's burning calories. And that's your basal metabolic rate. And so what this paper essentially showed was like, okay, we're going to look at the total energy expenditure over the last 30 years. Actually, let me rewind just a second. So obesity is caused whenever you have over intake versus lower output. So expenditure, yes. So higher energy intake, more calories. You're not burning them all, so it gets stored as fat. That's essentially obesity. That's the simplest cause. That's why you'll hear people say it's all about calories in versus calories out. How much are you intaking? And what this paper showed is they looked at total energy expenditures. And a lot of people say, a lot of health gurus and even scientists and physicians, they even say, well, the increase in obesity over the last 30 or 40 years is because we're less active. We're more sedentary. And that seems like it might be true. We do sit for jobs more often, seemingly more often than not. We also drive more often than we did even 40 years ago, but really going back 100 years, we obviously don't walk nearly as much. So that sort of had some credence to it. This paper kind of just shredded that idea or tore that idea to shreds because it showed that our total energy expenditure has decreased over the last 30 years. But how? If they looked at how much active energy is being expended, actually doesn't decrease. I think, let me check my notes. I think it actually shows that it might increase just a little bit, or at least it stays the same over the last 30 years. So we're still burning the same amount of calories actively as we were 30 to 40 years ago. So maybe that could be because we are bigger now, so it takes a little bit more energy to walk from here to there, so you don't have to walk as much. But what's interesting is the paper showed that the basal metabolic rate decreased. So how much energy is your body burning when you're just at rest? And when that decreases over time, there's got to be some interesting cause to that. Like, how do we fix that? Because that's not really something that we can control. We talked about a lot of us talk about obesity being, entirely on the individual. But this paper sort of showed that might not necessarily be completely true. Yes, you can control your intake, but you can't really, or we don't know exactly how you can control your basal metabolic rate. You can control it through, this is how weight loss drugs in the past that were dangerous caused weight losses. They would basically cause you to burn a lot of energy, but that was dangerous because it would cause sudden cardiac death. So those weight loss drugs were banned. That was like 40 or 50 years ago. But essentially the idea of if we could find a way to manipulate basal metabolic rate, you could find a way to sort of treat obesity. And two ideas laid out by this paper was, I'll say the first because I didn't quite go into it as much. The first is this parallels the decline in basal metabolic rate parallels a decline in core body temperature over the last 30 years. And how do those two relate? Well, the reason some people think we might have a decline in core body temperature is because we don't have to thermoregulate as much. We're in environments, houses with ACs and heaters that can thermoregulate for us. So we don't have to burn as much energy to thermoregulate. So I think that might be partially true. That's at least in part. But then they also showed this interesting idea with saturated fat and unsaturated fat. So saturated fat is essentially the fats that are solid at room temperature, like butter, coconut oil. Unsaturated fats are your liquids at room temperature. And there's degrees of unsaturation that I'm not going to get into today because I don't know it super well and it's not super relevant. But these are your like vegetable oils, your olive oil, different oils are your unsaturated fats. And generally, we've always heard that saturated fats are bad for you. Butter is bad for you. We've always heard that. But actually, what they show in this paper with mice, keep that in mind, is as you increase saturated fat intake, so as a percentage of the calorie intake, you keep the calorie intake constant. As you increase saturated fat as a percentage of that, the mice actually showed increasing basal metabolic rate. And over the last, even the last 60 years, we've slowly been decreasing the amount of saturated fats in our diets and increasing the amounts of unsaturated fat. So that was just kind of like an interesting thing that I don't exactly know what the mechanisms behind why that could be bad, but that could be something that people will start to investigate quite a bit more over the next few years. So this paper was a big deal because this sort of gives a lot of credence to new ideas that a lot of people are gonna go after and figure out, and then we are slowly going to begin to understand. Okay, this is how you modify your basal metabolic rate. So yeah, any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like, what's the term? What do you go to call it? Nutrition? It seems like nutrition is almost a pseudoscience.
Yes.
And we don't really know. And what makes it difficult, from what I've heard, is everybody's so different. Mm-hmm. Like every person has a different recipe or DNA, I guess you could say, to manipulating their weight. What works for some people doesn't work for others. But I have heard for a long time, like eggs. I've heard eggs are terrible for you. And then, 5 years later, eggs are so good for you. You can't get enough eggs. Butter and like bacon grease, I've heard is terrible for you. Now, I guess, greasy stuff like that. I don't know how. I'm reading that a lot of high saturated fat can lead to high cholesterol and heart disease. So I'm sure there's some type of limit or some type of happy medium between those.
Definitely. But those studies, so I guess I won't really comment on how true those are because I don't know. But those studies are what caused, all these recommendations that saturated fat is bad. And I think heart disease is quite a bit more complicated. I work on heart failure, so not really like when we talk about heart disease, heart failure is a part of that, but more often than not, we're talking about atherosclerosis, which is like the buildup of plaques, and which eventually causes heart attack. So I'm not super familiar with that, but that idea that the saturated fat caused heart disease has really caused saturated fat to become demonized. And this paper shows maybe this might not be such a good idea to demonize this. They might not be so bad after all. But yes, nutritional. I don't know why. There we go. Nutritional epidemiology studies are all over the place. They're terrible because you can essentially come in with an idea, and you can find data to support your idea because biology is so complex and nutrition is so complex. It's impossible to perfectly control, which is why this study is not a nutritional study. The study was strictly looking at energy expenditure through like rigorous doubly labeled water experiments, which I don't necessarily want to get into how it works because I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it's a extremely rigorous way to measure energy expenditure. And then the idea of the saturated fat comes from just their mouse study. They also, I'm being a bit more assertive when I say that this could have implications. They're, the cautious scientists that say, maybe this could be a reason, but we don't want to jump ahead of ourselves. But yes, the whole nutritional epidemiology space is just kind of a disaster. They always change their ideas. Like eggs are good, eggs are bad, eggs are good, eggs are bad. It changes every 3 seconds. It's like omega-3 fatty acids, good, bad, good, 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 bad. Oh, okay. Well, are they good or bad? We see 50 studies that say they're good, and then we see 3 that say, oh, they might be actually bad for you. So it's like it's just it's a mess of a field.
Another thing that I've seen, and I think it was on a Joe Rogan podcast or on like a clip from a Joe Rogan podcast about like seed oils and stuff, about how seed oils are like absolutely disgustingly terrible for you.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about the seed oil thing, but I've always seen that, and I think it might be a little bit of something that's a little bit over exaggerated. I think they're probably bad for you, especially if you take this mouse portion of the study at face value. It just generally says that these oils that are liquid at room temperature are pretty bad for you. But I think a lot of the seed oil stuff gets a worse name because of the it has to do something with actually I don't know. I'll step out of that part because I don't know it well enough. But I will say I think it might be overly demonized. It has an air of correctness to it, but maybe over the top. And it might just be like, okay, saturated fat in general or unsaturated fat in general. I'm always going to mess that up. They're so similar to me. Unsaturated fat in general is bad for you, and seed oils fall in that category.
Like this article I'm reading about seed oils and vegetable oils that like omega-6, I guess, is that bad for you? According to this study, it is. Corn oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, peanut oil, sesame oil, and rice bran oil. They're both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. But you need those, but apparently it's in too high of concentration, which is in these.
The omega
bad for you.
The fatty acids are all about ratios, like how much omega-3s versus 6 do you have? And I don't know which. I think the ratio is supposed to be more in favor of the 3s than the 6, but I don't really know because it's
consult your doctor. Referring to this stuff.
Yeah. I guess we're technically supposed to say that.
But this article is also saying like, this is from healthline.com. Coconut oil and olive oil are both excellent choices in substitution for vegetable oils.
So this paper, coconut oil is saturated fat. Olive oil is an unsaturated fat, and everyone always says, okay, olive oil is wonderful for you. And I love olive oil. I've actually always thought that I cook only with olive oil, mostly because I like it. But the saturated fat, so the coconut oil might end up being the superior fat. but it's more difficult to cook with because it's solid at room temperature.
Yeah, and I mean, olive oil is like off the charts popular. It's like more popular than just regular vegetable oil or canola oil. Is that the other one?
Yeah, yeah.
So like I'm sure I mean, olive oil is a lot more cheaper than those others that I mentioned, but is coconut oil have a low, what is it, not steam point, smoke point?
Smoke point. It's about the smoke points, I guess, with those people that think health, all these different health things. But I will say another sort of old paper that showed that, there's, like you said, there's a lot of genetic differences with people, and that's why it's so difficult with nutrition and obesity. And just to like further hammer that point home is like there's one paper that shows like there's certain genes or areas of the genome that are highly associated with diseases, and these genes, one of them, or one of the variants that's highly associated with obesity or in people with obesity, actually, it's a very complex genetic circuit. So I'm going to very, very much simplify this. Essentially, it shows like this one base pair switch between certain individuals either leads to in leaner people, leads to more of a brown fat phenotype. So these brown fat cells tend to burn off energy, dissipate energy through thermogenesis, so the creation of heat. And some people with obesity, I won't say all people with obesity, some people with obesity have a gene or a single base pair mutation that causes the accumulation of white fat instead of brown fat. And this is something completely evolved, because it makes a lot of sense. If you had to go without food or for a long period of time, you need that white fat. You don't need the brown fat. So this was something evolved in certain groups of people to deal with the lack of food during certain periods, such as the winter. So yeah, there's definitely some genetic components to obesity, but the ultimate thing you can control is your intake. How much food are you eating? And that has increased by quite a bit over the last 40 years, I believe, as per individual. And actually, what another thing that I thought was interesting from the original paper, the decline in metabolic rate, just to put some numbers out there, for men, we are burning approximately 220 less calories per day, and women are about, I think it was 120 less calories per day, as compared to similar sized, similar age people in the 1980s. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a huge difference. Like,
yeah. Well, the math I did on that, that's 16 days to gain a pound. So you're getting a pound, on average, gaining a pound every 16 days through this you called it the basal.
The basal metabolic rate.
Yeah. So you're gaining 16 pounds because your body's producing or
burning less
220, which that's 23 pounds a year. So
yeah. And those numbers aren't always perfect, but it's essentially we're burning less and we're intaking more. Like, what's going to happen? We're going to gain weight, and that's what you see. And if you look, everyone's seen the obesity epidemic map. That's like, the U.S. in the 1980s, everything's like blue, and then it's in some spotty areas of red, which is like the areas that have obesity. And then you get to 2020, and it's like everywhere's red. It's everyone.
This is the United States.
Yeah, in the U.S. Specifically in the U.S. This study was done in the U.S., and some of the participants were or some of the database was also collected in Europe. So very similar lifestyle as the U.S. I mean, there's definitely some slight differences.
First world,
first world.
Well off.
Yep.
So does Europe have this issue? I mean, they have. I think their obesity issue has increased some, but it's not as substantial
nearly as much as the U.S. Not nearly as much as the
Well, I
U.S.
think a lot of it has to do with in the U.S. things are so cheap. Or I say cheap. It's more expensive than elsewhere, but we have more money than elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, like, you go to Europe and you're getting half the food for the same price. Well, you got to be ultra rich to be able to, buy 2 or 3 to get an American sized portion somewhere.
Yeah, I wonder if they have the data separated out between Europe and the U.S. That would be interesting to see. I don't think it was in the paper, but
yeah, I mean, imagine go back to the numbers. I mean, imagine gaining your freshman 15 every year.
Every year,
like, and now, like you said, the numbers aren't going to be perfect like that, but
yeah,
if you say on average, like that's 100 pounds every math on the spot. Yeah.
Technically, that'd be every 5 years, but you have to think as you gain weight, the amount of calories you intake to gain more weight increases. So it's not a perfectly linear equation.
6.6 years you gain 100 pounds. Yeah. Well, and speaking of, you said something about brown fat. That reminds me of I've been seeing a bunch of TikToks about like ice baths.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to transition to this or if
yes, we can.
So on TikTok I've been seeing, and Joe Rogan's had on a couple of guys that talk about this, and people in the comments, you can say it. The fat guy wants every excuse, or not every excuse, but every way of doing something besides eating less and exercising. But I see these TikToks, and it's about talking about the benefits of ice baths. And the clip that I'm thinking of specifically talks about brown fat and how for years we did ice baths at like athletes only, or like mainly athletes, like after you did a vigorous workout, or like after a practice, after a marathon or something, you took some type of ice bath. And at least when I played football, a lot of people did take ice baths, and they actually physically put ice into this big trough, I guess you could say, and people sat in it. I looked into it a little bit, and a lot of people are saying it doesn't necessarily have to be ice. It doesn't necessarily have to be 33 degrees or, below 40 degrees for it to have the benefit.
Yeah.
They're saying like even tap water, like 60-degree tap water will work. I don't know. What do you think on that kind of stuff? You did a little bit of research.
I did read a little bit this week on ice baths, and if you asked me this last week, I would have told you they're complete garbage. Like, not worth the money, which I think still probably not worth the money. But I would have just thought it was completely useless. Health guru.
It's like the nutrition guys that are saying, "Hey, take my supplement."
Yes. But I think there's some degree of truth, and there's definitely a benefit to this cold exposure. I don't want to call it ice baths because the research is all over the place. It's not just ice baths. Like, I have seen all the videos of people getting in their ice baths, and just as one warning to like put it off the front, which the reason I was going to say is garbage is because there was a really popular study from a few years ago that showed ice baths specifically after workouts, immediately after workouts, which is a popular thing to do for athletes, inhibited muscle growth. So I was like, wow, this is terrible. Like, okay, this is really bad. So I've always had that in my head. This is a bad thing. But I think a lot of people don't realize that was a very popular study 4 or 5 years ago. So they should be aware, if you're taking an ice bath after heavy lifting and your intention is to gain muscle, you're probably not doing the best, making the best decision. That said, I do think there might be some benefits to this cold exposure thing. And I don't know. The problem with this line of research is like it always varies. Like okay, we don't have a perfectly controlled, or every study that comes out isn't like the exact same temperature of water. Some of them might be cold shower. Some of them might be cold exposure, like outside. Some of them might be cold. What is the thing that Joe Rogan does, where it gets in like the cold, like the opposite of the sauna? Not the opposite of the sauna, the cold version.
The beer cave on cue.
Yeah, that thing. But they're all over the place, and I don't know, like, how long do you have to be exposed? How do you have to be exposed? What's the temperature need to be to gain this brown fat? But there are some studies that show, okay, these cold exposure in general activates brown fat. And what do I mean by activates brown fat? That means brown fat is what does the thermogenesis part, or one of the things that does thermogenesis. So it's burning energy. So it's activating brown fat. Do you get more brown fat is the ultimate question. And some papers I have definitely shown that you can increase brown fat with cold exposure. So that idea, I think if you have more brown fat, then theoretically you should probably be burning more energy. That idea that we talked about earlier with energy expenditure, basal energy expenditure should go up if you have higher brown fat. Babies have really high brown fat because they don't have the mechanisms to shiver, to warm themselves up. So they have brown fat to sort of warm themselves up in cold situations. So that makes sense to me. I haven't dug deeply enough to see if it's really like robust that it causes weight loss really effectively. But in theory, it should help. It doesn't. In theory, it probably doesn't hurt. But I think, like I said earlier, the most effective way to lose weight is the intake. Always hitting on the intake. How many calories are you intaking? You have to decrease it. These other things, just gravy on the top. Like if you're gonna exercise, that's great, because exercise is the most healthy thing you could do. I don't think it necessarily makes you lose. I don't think it's the most effective way to lose weight specifically, but it's great in all other aspects, such as improving insulin resistance, which is a major detrimental effect of obesity and eventually type 2 diabetes. Yeah, I think that part of the cold baths, cold exposure is interesting, but it's not the most interesting thing to me from what I've read this week. The most interesting thing to me that I saw was this cold exposure mid-workout between sets. This is the most wild thing I've ever. I actually heard it on one of Huberman's podcasts, and I will not explain it nearly as well as he did, because he goes into it for 2 hours. I'm about to do like 2 minutes. And so you look up Huberman, and I think it's just cold exposure. He has 3 podcasts. I listened to, or he has 2 podcasts. He released another one today, so he has 3. I've listened to all of them. I haven't finished the one that was released today. I'm on the last 30 minutes, but they're all very, very similar, overlapping. But one of them specifically talks a lot about this cold exposure mid-workout, so between sets, essentially. So these participants, the best way to decrease core body temperature is to make the palms of the hand cold, cheeks, upper face, so cheeks, put ice on them, and the bottoms of your feet. So they were doing that to these participants mid-workout, and essentially it could increase the amount of work they could do in the workout by 400%, up to 400%, I should say. So essentially they could go longer. Not that they were 400% stronger. Like, of course, they weren't going to go bench. They weren't benching from
100 and then went to 400. Yeah, 400 pounds.
Yeah. No, but they could go longer. So something about the cold exposure allowed them to keep going. And I don't know what it is, and I didn't dig far enough to determine why does that help. But it somehow prevents the wearing of the muscles. So the overheating is one of the reasons why you kind of get to exhaustion of in working out. And I guess somehow it prevents this overheating, and you could just keep going. So this is going to completely, it's going to be a wellspring of pro athletes are all going to be doing this. Because
at halftime, some sort of
I'm sure
halftime.
they are. You see already fighters over the last 15 years. They had this idea that yes, you can do the cold exposure, but they were doing it wrong. I think
like on the neck, like
they
a
were doing it
cold
on the
towel.
neck, which is apparently not the best way to decrease the core body temperature, because apparently somehow the signaling to the hypothalamus from the neck will say, "Oh, we're cold, heat the body up." So you're increasing thermogenesis, but some, and that's why I got to listen to the Huberman podcast again. But the palms of the hands and the cheeks and the feet will decrease the core body temperature. So I'm sure you'll start to see fighters between rounds start to cool down on the palms of the hands and the face, or like I said, halftime.
Yeah, well, as a fighter, I don't know how you do that because you have your gloves on.
Yeah, you have your gloves on. They'll probably have to do the feet,
but you could do
the cheeks,
cheeks maybe.
Yeah,
and there might be a fourth one that's okay.
Yeah.
I know that back in the day, my grandfather would always say, you need to wear a hat because 40% of your body loss comes through the top of your head, and I'm sure that was just made up.
Yeah,
but I'm sure there's another spot that's obviously there has to be another spot that's the fourth best or something.
Yeah.
Maybe on the chest, a cold.
Yeah. It's some. I mean, it's interesting. That's actually that's what they usually do in UFC rounds. If you see them, so probably so, because these guys are not. These are usually, those trainers are very advanced scientists, typically physicians, and
they'll take anything they can get. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I think it's going to proliferate massively in the fitness community.
Mm-hmm.
So,
did you go over the difference between white and brown fat in the first section?
I don't think I did. I probably should. I don't remember. So essentially, brown fat, or I'll say white fat, is what you typically know as fat. Adipose tissue, white fat, simply storage of fats and lipids is for energy. The entire idea of obesity and fat gain is as a storage system that you can access for energy later, because energy is the most important thing your cells can harness, and it's done through carbon, for survival. So you're essentially carbon storage in the form of lipids, and that's used as energy during times of energetic catastrophe. Brown fat, on the other hand, is typically the fat that surrounds. I think there's pads on the back of the neck. I think it's probably pretty widely distributed. Maybe close to the organs, but the purpose of brown fat is for thermogenesis, to generate heat. These are high in mitochondria, which are the energy powerhouse of the cell. You hear that all the time. And they're high in mitochondria, which gives them the brown look, and they just burn energy, burn carbon to create heat. And you have during life, during aging process, babies high in brown fat, you just slowly you lose that brown fat over time.
Okay. And so can white fat be transitioned into brown fat, or
I don't want to say it can. It can be. They call it beiging of the white fat, which is essentially there's some gaining of mitochondria, increase in mitochondria, but I don't know specifically if it can be turned into brown fat as in a one-to-one switch, a transition switch. It might be able to. I didn't read that far into it, but beiging definitely happens, especially with physical activity. With cold exposure, you'll start to see this beiging of the white adipose fat.
Well, and I guess this is a shot in the dark because I don't really know. I guess maybe your body says, "Hey, we've been spending a lot of extra brown fat," and like I said, I don't know if this is true, or if our bodies are this smart, but we've been spending a lot of extra brown fat. We should probably store more brown fat rather than white fat. I don't know if that's.
I'm sure there's lots of switches that I don't know about, and there's probably lots of switches that we haven't uncovered yet, because I think the brown fat scientific field is rapidly gaining steam. So
good.
No, you could go. You go.
I guess my next question would have been I guess does your body chooses? It's not like brown fat; it comes from certain foods, or white fat comes from certain foods.
Yeah.
It does.
No.
Okay, you're agreeing with me.
What you're saying is right. It's not like food. It's not a food thing. It's not a food thing.
So your body chooses to store brown fat or white fat. So if you're always spending your brown fat,
I wouldn't say it doesn't choose to store brown fat versus white fat. Okay. Fat, energy, is stored in the white fat. Okay. Grow, they get bigger, they multiply to store more energy. Brown fat is not necessarily storing the energy; it's burning the energy. Okay. So it's not like the storage or the type of storage is what causes either white fat or there to be brown fat. They're both taking in the same molecules. They're both taking in lipids, glucose. They're either burning it or they're storing it. And one type of cell is storing it, and the other is burning it off.
Okay. Because I would say it's like you eat 12 cookies and 3 of them go to brown fat, and the other 9 go to white fat. Which reminds me of the Chris Pratt scene from Parks and Rec where he's like punching the air and says spaghetti cookie. He's burning energy. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. The different types of fat. I guess you said beiging is like white fat being prepared to be burned as brown fat. Is that what I took from that?
I don't know how the beiging process exactly happens, but I'm guessing it is highly associated with cold exposure and physical activity. It's just essentially more mitochondrial biogenesis happening in the white fat cells. So they kind of look brown. The mitochondria is sort of giving off this brown look. And that if they have more mitochondria, that generally means they're probably burning more energy rather than storing as much lipid, fat, and they're burning it off instead.
One of the other, I don't know if your podcast that you listened to talked about it or your studies talked about it, but there's like a mental focusing after cold exposure, and then also it's like a mental. I don't know how the right way to put it. Not a mental break, but like a calming, like a mental calming after cold exposure.
I did see this. I've never really tried the cold. I've done it once, and
you've never taken a cold shower before?
I've taken cold showers, and actually, I was going to say on the ice bath thing, I think you could probably be pretty safe to substitute ice baths with cold showers and save a lot of money. But yeah, I did see another interesting effect. So I'm glad you brought it up. Was the mental benefits? So it's like that dopamine rush you get when you get in the cold, and you get out and you have this. Supposedly you have this laser focus. I don't ever remember having laser focus after a cold shower or a cold bath, but a lot of people say that. Have you done it? Do you know?
I mean, I've done cold. I mean, I did like a month worth of like cold showers before.
Yeah.
I guess I would say I would, and this could be a confirmation bias from myself of I feel like I was focused more.
Yeah.
But is it like I heard that this is the effects, and so I look for them. That, like I said, that confirmation bias. But I will say it feels really good when you get out of a cold shower into like a warm room.
Yeah. But even if it is a placebo effect, like
that's good, right? I mean, it doesn't really cost you anything.
It works. It works for you. So that's my thought on the placebo effect is
if you think it's working,
it's working. Yeah. We should do a podcast sometime on the placebo effect because it's just wild.
Okay. We can do it after our next one with Matt.
Sounds good.
It's interesting. I mean, I take faster showers a little bit. One of the TikToks that I saw, the guy was describing, you really only need 5 minutes a day. It's not like you need to be sitting in an ice bath or a cold bath or cold shower for 30 minutes. You know, at that point you might get hypothermia.
Yeah. That's the danger of those exposures.
But like taking a cold shower, hot showers have an interesting effect too. And I know this is a little off topic, but in like a hot shower, I know our brains, we like release like a certain, is it endorphin maybe, that like causes us to be more creative. Like people will become more creative. Isn't there like 3 types of brain waves or something? And like it's like the delta one or something. I haven't done a ton of research on it. I've heard. Go ahead.
I don't know this. I don't know the heat benefits yet, but that's definitely something I'm going to be listening to yet or this week, because I've just gone in this cold rabbit hole, ready to do the heat part. But I don't know. There's definitely more than 3 types of brainwaves, but
maybe
could be. Why do people always say they have their best thoughts in the shower? So,
and I think that's part of it. Of like when you're taking a warm shower, it gives you like comfort. Like you'll have like comfort in the moment, and you have like this creativity spike. And I think it's due to like the type of brain activity that is caused by like this warm steam.
Yeah.
So like there's definitely benefits to warm showers. Not saying like every shower you ever have to take for the rest of your life has to be cold because of the mental benefit, the focusing. Yeah. Like there's definitely like different aspects to each different things that we do in our life that, I mean, for most of us, you know, we do an everyday thing, you know, take a shower every day. So we'll have to do a little bit more research on warm showers, but I'm pretty sure it inspires like creativity. There's like some comforting in there, and it's all very interesting.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, it feels good.
I mean,
good.
These are like basic questions of human physiology that we still don't even understand yet, is this thermal regulation and how it affects all these different systems in the body. So it's just fascinating that these are like very low hanging fruits that we've kind of just, you know, overlooked over the last several decades. And so it'll be interesting as people look more into it. That actually reminded me when you brought up the hot showers. I did a cold shower or cold plunge thing in a hot tub contrast one time. It was like in 9th grade. Me and Connor, who was on the podcast a few times ago, we kept doing this hot tub that was 101 degrees, and then we would jump into this pool that was like 70, so it's cold, like, but it's not, you know, an ice bath by any means. Maybe 67. It was cold water, but we would go back and forth between the two, and we called it God mode. So apparently we felt really good from it.
Let's see. This says reduces muscle soreness and fatigue, improve cardiovascular health, improve brain health. This is from medicalnewstoday.com. So if you don't trust them as a source, I guess ignore this. Improve brain health, better blood flow to joints and muscles, and it says improve sleep, which I feel like I've heard that for cold showers.
Yeah,
taking a cold shower before you go to bed can lead to
better
your
sleep.
body core temperature, and you can go to sleep faster and more deeply.
I've heard that too. I tested it out once, and I didn't notice anything because like the sympathetic nervous system got more activated because of the cold. Like I was more like stressed, but sleep generally, when you're entering sleep, your body temperature is dropping. So if you drop your body temperature, and you know you're not like someone that gets, you know, stressed in a cold shower, and I don't mean like mentally stressed, like I wasn't like, oh gosh, it was more like the body's like, oh, this is like a stressor. And I think some people, they get used to the cold, so they're like, okay, this is normal thing. I think those people will probably end up having maybe some benefit to sleep. And I actually wanted to mention before we get off of it that it doesn't even necessarily take 5 minutes a day. I saw that the one of the person that Huberman had on today, I cannot remember her name. She just published a paper pretty recently showing many benefits for just 11 minutes a week in the ice bath, or I think it was an ice bath that she was doing. So yeah, it could be pretty short, like, you know, 2-3 minutes, 3 minutes 3 times a week or something improves. I think she was talking about brown fat thermogenesis, so activation of brown fat.
Yeah, so I guess you could take a warm shower and then for your last 2 minutes, you get in there and you turn it to all the way cold.
All the way cold, switch it up.
So we're kind of getting towards the end. Kind of another topic we had discussed was Elon Musk and the new Twitter CEO hire. He stepped down, I guess, as CEO and stepped into CTO. Chief Technology Officer, I think is what that stands for. So focusing more on the science, or not science, the
product technology, like development.
And she's focusing more on the marketing and financial side of it, I guess.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why he did this is because he wants to step back and focus a little more on his other companies. I think he feels like he's been focusing so much on Twitter since the purchase that Tesla and Space. I mean, I've seen him tweet about SpaceX quite a bit, but SpaceX and the Boring Company all have not, I guess, they've suffered a little bit. So he hired Linda. I've already forgotten her name.
Yaccarino.
She most recently was the chair of the advising advertising sales for NBC Universal.
So she was hired, one, like you just said it. She seems to know the advertising world and probably has a lot of good relations with advertising companies, which I know, as big of a Elon fan, I guess, as I am, and as big as Elon fans there are in the world, he is not done good with, rallying favor with the advertisers on Twitter. Partially that's a political thing, but this seems to be at least partially a hire to maybe repair some of those advertiser relationships.
Yes. I think that's been kind of, he struggled with that in general, not just with Twitter.
Yeah.
I think that's been kind of his struggle. Elon Musk's struggle across the board has been his advertising and relationships with people like other companies, not necessarily like I think he has a great relationship with customers. I think he's somebody that people look up to and can be actual genuine fans of. The relationship with other companies, I guess he doesn't necessarily need that with like Tesla and Boring Company. I mean, I guess Boring Company need good relationships with like the government, but like the other ones it's a completely different type of business Twitter is than the rest of his. Like Boring Company is I guess a service, client based.
Does Boring Company even have any revenue?
I mean, I think they get government contracts.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think they're all funded from him.
Yeah.
SpaceX, again, government contract. I call it a service. I'm not for sure what it actually would be called, but
they're trying to build out the service wing with what's the Starlink.
Yeah. So Twitter is just such a different animal compared to the rest of his companies. I mean, Tesla's not going to be putting advertisements on their website or advertisements on their vehicles for people. So why would you ever need to interact with advertisers? So when he bought Twitter, I think being the smart, I mean, he's genuinely very smart, business-wise and technology-wise. Or I guess technology-wise is the right way to put it. So he's very smart, and being the smart guy he is, he needs somebody that can complement him well in those other aspects. And that is like, the President of the United States, you hope that the people in his cabinet are way smarter than he is, because he needs the advice from them. He can't be jack of all trades and everything, or great in everything. So adding people to your cabinet that are genuinely really smart in their aspects of business or policies is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it seems like a good move from Elon, and There's so, I mean, I like the idea. I mean, the big thing that he did as CEO was launch the Twitter Blue, the subscription thing, which I haven't done that because I see one problem with it that can be fixed pretty easily, and I'm sure they're working on it. Is there's got to be some better benefits to Twitter Blue than there is. It seems just like a patronage service right now to Elon. If you like Elon, then you buy the Twitter Blue, and I'm not going to do that. And a lot of people are doing it as or not doing it just out of spite of Elon. So I think they need to launch something nice about it outside of just giving the blue check marks more reach, because that just it brings about the same problem that was originally had with the blue check marks. Except now it's not just artificial; it's literally throttling the non-blue check marks. So,
I mean, I think there is definitely a perceived status with the blue check mark, at least from old users.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's definitely gone down quite a bit, the perception of status.
Yeah.
Just because of anyone can buy it now. But I mean, if you're a low, you have 500 followers and you have a blue check mark, okay, you bought that.
Yeah, everyone laughs at you now.
You get laughed at. But I still think of it like, okay, a celebrity has this blue check mark. This is the real one. So I still associate it with that. But
yeah,
it's definitely lost a little bit of its value, cheapened it a little bit.
Which I think.
What features do you even get with blue?
Nothing. You just get. Well, you probably get something that I'm not aware of.
You get HD videos, don't you, and longer videos, maybe?
Yeah, and you get the longer tweets. That's why there's so many obnoxiously long tweets now. I hate it.
Well, I think they get pushed a little bit more because
they
they're
do.
quote unquote new.
He actually said that people with Twitter Blue would have preference on the For You page, and if you look in any thread, it's always the blue check marks that are at the top of the comment section, even if they have no likes. So,
were you about to say something before I interrupt you?
No.
I do think it's interesting. My Twitter experience is a lot different than other apps. So, if you think about it, Facebook, when you have Facebook, I guess you're not on Facebook very much, but when you're on Facebook, it's a mixture of videos they want you to see or like that they think you want to see, and then your friends, but they also prioritize your friends based on what what they're posting about, based on their algorithm. So it's kind of a mixture. It's a mixture of all three. It seems very natural from my side. They're not pushing things that are 12 days old because they think you want to see it. They're not pushing, they're pushing videos that seem somewhat relevant. Like I see funny dog videos all the time, or just funny fail videos a lot. And then I'm seeing my friends' stuff that is somewhat recent. So it's a very good mixture.
Yeah.
Props to Meta or to Facebook for that.
Yeah.
But then you go to something like TikTok. TikTok, I never go to my following.
Yeah.
Like I follow a bunch of people, but I never see their videos. Like they might pop up every once in a while on my For You page, but it has the two sections. It has the following section and the For You section. I never go to my following section.
Me neither.
Okay. Well, when I'm on Twitter, it's different. They have the same thing, but I'm always on my following section.
Yeah.
And I'm almost never on my For You section.
Yep.
So why do you think that is?
This is actually something I've been thinking about recently.
Okay.
It's this transition of social media from social to just straight media. So Facebook is the perfect example. Facebook was your close friends. Majority of it still is your close friends and family. Twitter was the first social media to sort of step out of that, where it was your close friends, but for the first time ever, you were also seeing celebrities constantly. You were seeing new people all the time. You've had anonymous accounts. You could get retweeted and go viral. And now the final transformation was TikTok, which is just not social. It's just media, entertainment. It's gotten rid of any closeness aspect. It's gotten rid of any friends, family. It's all just pure dopamine and entertainment. So it's not, that's why I don't like calling it social media. I've been actually thinking about this a lot in the last 2 weeks. Is why did we transition from this to this? Like, we always talk about how social media is bad, but the one good thing about social media was the closeness you could get to friends and family. Like, it allowed you to stay close to people that when you moved to 500 miles away from all your friends, you were still able to keep up with them. And the new social medias have just slowly been transitioning away to this no relation whatsoever, just purely entertainment basis. So I don't know. I don't know why.
Follow the money.
Yeah,
it's easier to push something, a sponsored thing, if you don't know any of the people that you're looking on your page for.
Yeah.
At least this is my theory, I guess. I don't know this 100% fact, but if I see a bunch of my friends' tweets and then in the middle of them is a sponsored tweet, I'm not going to pay attention to the sponsored tweet because I know I'm going to read the name or I'm going to read the tweet, read the name and say, I really don't care about that. And I forget about it.
Yeah.
I'm going, if it's my friend, I'm going to read it, see their name, see their profile, see their profile picture and say, oh yeah, that's really cool. But if I'm reading the tweet, it's funny. I look at the person. Oh, I don't know that person. Next tweet, same thing. And then I see a sponsored one and it's somebody I don't know. I'm going to think, oh, okay, that's just part of my For You page. And not necessarily alienate the ad to be separate.
That's
true. We do that if we're seeing our friends, we alienate that ad as whatever. It's not what I wanted. So that's my theory.
That makes sense. But also, when you think about it, I don't know if it makes complete sense because Facebook ads were always the most effective ads for marketers. Twitter ads have always been really ineffective.
Well, my theory for that is that Facebook knows everything about you.
That's true. They have better targeting.
They could be targeted down to the block that you're on.
That's true. That's true.
So, Twitter.
But why can't Twitter? Why doesn't Twitter have that ability?
Because they probably have to build your profile. Like they need enough data. This is, like I said, this is all a theory. I have zero knowledge on that.
No, you're right.
But like Twitter has to build your profile for you of what you like. Facebook, they ask you when you sign up, they say, what do you like?
What do you like?
You're like, well, I like Paul Blart Mall Cop. Let me like that. And they're going to show you some movie stuff, So,
yeah. But Twitter technically does do that. They do ask you when you first open an account, what do you like? It's something about that. I think it's just the fact that on Twitter, the best way to market is just organic. The things that go viral can sell a lot, but when it's not viral, it's just, there's something about the mentality on Twitter. It's like, oh, you bought that, you can just go viral on your own. That's kind of sad.
Well, it hurts. To piggyback off that, what hurts Twitter a lot on their advertisements is they have to put sponsored. Like you have to. This goes for like a lot of different things. If we were to do an ad read, hey, today's video is sponsored by, we have to read that. We have to read out loud, or we have to acknowledge that somebody paid for this.
Yeah.
With organic, you went viral on your own. It's more, like I said, it's more of that like disassociation between somebody paying for something or forcing it on you versus organic.
Yeah. And I just think that because Twitter has that ability to be able to organically market better than any platform until TikTok, I think maybe that's why it never made that much from advertisers as compared to any other social platform. I think they have less data than Facebook, but I don't think it's not so much less that they can't even generate a fraction of the advertising revenue that Facebook does. It's just something about the platform, the mentality of the people that have always been on it that just doesn't work as well for marketing. And I that's why I hope that Elon's vision for the platform was that it could be a lot more than just the Twitter page. It's going to be like a video platform, a blog.
Everything in one platform is what he called it.
Yeah. I think that would be kind of cool. I don't know if they can do it.
It is interesting that this Linda Yaccarino lady,
mm-hmm.
she's no ageism here, but she's 60 years old.
She really? She didn't look that old to me. Wow.
She's 60, and no offense to anybody that's listening that's 60 or more, but I guess you really only have 5 to 10 more years in the business. I guess 5. I mean, you start collecting. I mean, I'm sure she's beyond rich.
Yeah.
But maybe this is my small pea brain thinking about it, but you start collecting your retirement and Social Security at 65. So, that's about the retirement age. So she going to be on for 5 years, I don't know. I'm spitballing, but
I could see it being a very high turnover job.
I mean, Elon has done, we can get into the goods and bad things he's done. I guess you kind of already did with the Twitter Blue, but I want to think it's a good hire. And I do think it's going to be difficult for her because Elon does a good job of at least perception of brushing things off. Of things get said about him, and he does hold grudges for sure. I think he's shown that with different media outlets and stuff. But I think he at least perceives that it doesn't affect him, at least.
Yeah, and he acts like it, but yeah, he definitely. I think I could see him being too controlling, but I don't know. He's an interesting character, he does a lot of good, but he also does a lot of this kind of ridiculous stuff. Like, I wish that he had never really bought Twitter. Mostly just, I like the idea that the free speech thing was good. I mean, I was super psyched about that when he bought Twitter. I don't really feel like it's changed that much, just slightly. Maybe some slight improvements to, not kicking people off. But there's something he was working on such the biggest, the coolest problem in all of history in SpaceX. Like, why can't you just do it? Focus on that. Like, maybe obviously he's not, doing the day to day. He's not an engineer or anything. Although he likes to say he is. I'm sure he knows engineering very well. But like, if he really wants to act like he, might. I just don't like that he's getting so much credit for SpaceX when obviously he's so divided. And maybe it's fine that he is because he started it with his own money. And but how much can he possibly be doing there right now? And if
I think that's one of the reasons why he hired the CEO.
Yeah. And if he was there day to day, could they be doing better? Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. So yeah, it's just like, why focus on all these random things? Focus on the cool problems that you're already on.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very, is it virtuous? Is that the right term? Very not community. He's very oriented to do great things.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean losing money. Like, he's okay with losing money.
Yeah. So much it doesn't even matter.
Yeah. So I think he's just for the betterment of the world. And I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that, but the Twitter, I mean, the free speech thing I think is very virtuous. Is that I think it's very important. After some of the stuff that not necessarily leaked but released to the world of what Twitter was doing, what the government was doing, that
You're right.
is important.
Yeah.
I think that is very important, and it might be a complacency thing. I'm sure you're not the only one that was feeling that before I mentioned it.
Yeah.
That okay, is he say free speech? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And maybe saving free speech is an overstatement, but the amount of things that got released with the Twitter files that the government was doing of censoring people. I mean, I knew the FBI, the 3-letter agencies, were not necessarily the most honest. I mean, based on previous conspiracies, which we'll get into hopefully next week. But like, it's crazy how involved they were in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I completely forgot about the Twitter files. That was actually something very important and would have never happened if he didn't buy the company. So there was definitely benefit.
I mean, we knew it in the background, but it was just a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, you're right. I spoke too soon. I'm glad now that he's handing it off, and hopefully he steps back away and gives some reins to this lady, and she has the same values with the free speech idea, but can deal with the less chaotic mind of Elon Musk running the show. I think Twitter can be very successful, and if they can put good products out and make the vision that they've laid out, then I think it could be one of the best platforms available.
What I have seen is she's not necessarily all that free speech oriented, but I'm sure they have had the conversation.
Yeah.
The way that Elon talks about it, and just because he talks about free speech doesn't mean he actually is like for free speech. So like he definitely needs to be checked on the back end. Just because he says he's for free speech doesn't mean he gets a pass. I mean, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, I don't think he's for free speech for saying anything about China, because he's got Tesla as his whipping boy over in China. And then the Turkish government this week, actually yesterday, was he basically, did you see that tweet from him?
Mm-mm.
About how Turkey made him censor his opponents, or they were shutting off Twitter, and so they announced that they were going to censor the opponents.
Oh, so no, that's not good. So I mean, it goes to exactly what I was saying. Like, just because somebody, I guess, virtue signals that they're free speech activists doesn't mean they are free speech activists. This still needs to be checked.
Yeah.
So the transparency is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes down to it, I mean, a lot of people dunked on him for the free speech thing on Turkey, and it definitely deserves to be dunked on for that Turkey thing. But also, I care about free speech in the U.S. I don't really care about your free speech in Turkey. I mean, it'd be great if they had it, but I'm more concerned about the local issues.
That's very selfish of you. Thank you for saying that.
Well, it'd be great if they didn't do that, but I'm not going to get freaked out.
Maybe I'll get canceled for this. I mean, maybe I won't say it. I'm not going to say it. Never mind. But
all right.
I think it's important that everywhere has free speech.
Yes.
Now, do I think the United States should like go to war with other countries and police the world for their free speech? No.
Definitely not.
Granted, if you say something and say you send out a bad tweet and they start dragging you through the streets behind a horse, okay, maybe somebody should do something. I don't know if it should necessarily be the United States.
Yeah.
But we have enough on our plate of causing uprisings in the world to rebel against governments we didn't like, and then they end up being worse. I mean,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure Afghanistan and Iraq, we helped them overthrow their government, right? And then now they're just as bad.
Way worse. Yeah.
So we've already done plenty of that, and I don't think we do a very good job of
policing.
Yeah.
And I do want to rephrase what I said, because it does suck that all these companies, kowtow to China or Russia, or in this case Turkey, and like Google has a completely censored version of Google in China. Like that's such a shame. Like, why can't they just not be in China? And Twitter now is censoring opponents. Like, just don't be in Turkey. But it's complicated, because it just depends on how much. And it sucks that it is complicated, because these people they're so concerned about revenue and losing all this revenue. It's such a.
There's a weird dynamic issue, because you could also argue that, okay, well, if we keep Twitter in there, maybe we can slowly chip away at allowing free speech. It's like there is like a little bit of
some virtuous
glass half full aspect of it. So there is that aspect. But on the back end or on the front end of it that we see, we have no idea if that's the case. It could be we are bowing to Turkey because they are our third largest revenue stream for Twitter Blue and advertisements. Like that's definitely a thing. But as far as, hey, we're going to release these new features for free speech, we would really like, we'd really like you to continue. Get everybody hooked on it. If you can get everybody hooked on the app, maybe they overthrow their government saying we want Twitter back. That's probably unlikely, but that's my thought.
Yeah, I could see that, but yeah, it's a complex issue. Like I said, though, I'm more concerned about what happens here. I'm not going to worry so much about all the rest of the world because there's too much to worry about if we're worrying about all the rest of the world.
We got enough problems on our plate, yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully this new lady does good, though. I have some semi-high hopes.
Yeah. Well, she served on World Economic Forum, I believe, right?
Yeah, she's really good if both right-wing people and left-wing people are freaking out about her becoming CEO. Because all the right-wing people hate that she was on World Economic Forum, and then all the left-wing people hate that she was working for Trump in Trump's White House.
Yeah, let's see. She worked for Turner Media or Turner Entertainment as the vice president and chief COO or CEO,
chief operating officer.
Yeah, of ad sales.
So she's an ad professional,
developing innovative advertising and marketing solutions. She played a key role in adding Peacock to the streaming service for NBC.
Oh, screw her.
Let's see, she was on the Ad Council in 2014. 2018, President Trump appointed her to the Presidential Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. She also became the Ad Council's Board of Directors in January of 2021. She partnered as chair. She partnered with the Biden administration in 2021 to create a coronavirus vaccine campaign that featured Pope Francis.
Pope Francis?
Now, yeah, I guess. Now, she's working with both parties, but just because you work with the Biden administration doesn't necessarily, or the Trump administration, doesn't necessarily mean that you're with them.
Yeah,
you got hired to do a job. It's not like if somebody pays you $1 million, if somebody paid me $1 million to write a campaign ad for Biden, yes, I'll do it. If I do it for Trump too, So
same.
I'm getting hired to do a job, not necessarily I'm supporting them. Now, if she did it for free, that would be something different. But I do think it is good to be on both sides. That both sides hate her. I guess I got to look up what libertarians think. Do you have any hot takes or anything we've talked about that you want to rephrase?
I think the new CEO she'll be pretty successful, and I hope Elon just quiets down a little bit. I like his tweets sometimes, but how much work can he possibly be doing if you're tweeting 50 times a day?
And he runs it himself too.
Yeah,
he might have somebody tweet out like scheduled things or retweet things for him, but he's running it for the most part himself. My hot take is Boston Celtics advanced. They won Game 7. Ooh. So my dream is still alive that they can win the NBA championship. They barely pulled it out against Philadelphia 76ers. So
Game 7 was a murder, but
fingers crossed though that they continue. I feel bad for James Harden. I wish he could win a championship, but I already predicted the Boston Celtics were going to win. So sorry, bud.
I'm jumping on with you. I think the Celtics win.
They can definitely beat the Heat.
Yeah.
They'll have trouble against the Nuggets.
Yeah.
I don't think the Lakers can beat the Nuggets. Anyways, this isn't a sports podcast. If you want my sports knowledge, follow me on Twitter. Evan Blockfart. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, any other comments or hot takes, I will say, okay, hot take or cold take. I hope cold showers end up being better because I kind of enjoy them. It's weird. When you first start, it sucks, but
hey, if it works for you, then do it, especially for the mental benefits and the resilience, mental toughness kind of you get from it. But hopefully you also make some brown fat, I guess, from it. Who knows?
I'm all about that brown fat. That's why I always brown my ground beef before I eat it. This has been Simply Technical. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.